started the recording, so you can do the intro whenever.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone, to Legends of Dice. I'm Xeriana, your host, and as ever, I'm here with my co-host, and for tonight, my summonable companion, Kylar. Say hi. We haven't upgraded to speech yet, so we'll figure that out as we go down. Today's episode, we are going to talk about MacGuffins, and specifically, if you should use them or how you should use them. And because Kylar and I overanalyze everything, we're going to also delve into what is an actual MacGuffin and what is not. So, but before we get on to that, we have our, of course, news from the Tableland. I have a couple of videos. Only one is recent. The other two are kind of interesting things for specifically talking about MacGuffins. So the first one is from Dungeons Dudes. It's our Christmas gifts, their Christmas gifts episode for mainly people who play Dungeons and Dragons, but there's some good ideas in there too for people who just play roleplay games in general. I don't know if you saw that video.
I watched it after you posted the video.
Yay!
I watched the news, so I know what you're talking about. So I'm just like, this sounds fun, but I didn't see it, so.
So as someone who's never done any Dungeons and Dragons, what did you think of the video?
If I was a GM, I probably would have gotten all of the books anyway. So yeah, I'm just somebody that if I want something, I'm gonna go buy it and not expect somebody to get it for me. So there's that whole thing. It kind of interferes with Christmas presents. That's why Christmas presents work out really well for me anyway, because I probably bought it already. Where's your Christmas?
I don't have one.
So as D&D, I mean, I suppose the miniatures could be useful in a different fantasy setting, but I run a Star Wars campaign, so those would be totally useless for me at my current moment, especially since I run things online. So the miniatures only really work for someone who just likes miniatures to be in their room, which would be fun, but also superfluous. Can't talk. And
I am that superfluous person. Above me are a bunch of miniatures I don't get to use.
You still need to put them where your books are so that everybody can see your miniatures instead. Nobody cares what books you read. Nobody even cares what books I read.
No, I will get on that. Next
I guess the dice thing, I got dice because I thought I was going to be running an in-person game, and that never happened. So now I have dice. So the gifts that weren't D&D specific were very in-person specific. And so what I'm saying is nobody get me any of these things for Christmas because I will not use any of them.
No, I mean they were good suggestions. Like I said, they were mostly for Dungeons and Dragons. The spell cards thing, that is really useful. But I think that they're very specific to Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons because they're the only things that actually get you spell cards. If you really want to be helpful to someone and get them like a customized gift, make them spell cards. That would be way better because you know what system they're using and you know what they'll need. So that would be a better one. The miniatures, I would say the only exception to that would be, so let's say you played a game together that, like our Star Wars game, we've played it for 2.5 years. And although this won't really apply to us because both Kylar and I have played multiple characters. We've never just stuck with one character, but because, and Kaladi have, and maybe they had some great memories of that. And so for like Christmas, we made Kalani a miniature or made Eagle a miniature of Kalani. Like that would be a very sentimental, like, oh, remember that game we played together kind of thing. But yeah, no. And also I totally agreed with you when I saw the GM gifts. I was like, I would have bought all those by now because I'm like, oh, this one has subclasses and it's got more things for me to do. It has roll charts. I will,
I think a better gift for a GM may be other books that talk about the art of GMing and not necessarily a supplement to the actual game. So I remember when Kyrath was the Christmas before or his birthday before, which they're like a month apart, so it doesn't really matter the distinction. I got him a couple of like he just had to do GMing books basically that were since he was new to it. I was like, I'll be helpful, and then I got them and I read them first, and then I wrapped them and I gave them to him. So I got to read them first. Be like, I had now have the wisdom of the GM books, and I didn't have to get more than one copy. Um, but there's a lot of those out there, and so there's some that feed more into if you're like a combat heavy GM or like a dungeon crawler, or if you're more theater of the mind-ish. So you got to know your GM if you're going to give them something like that. Know what kind of thing would help elevate their GMing skills in something that they'd actually be interested in utilizing, and maybe find some good ideas for. But I think that would be more useful than here's this new adventure pack from D&D, because they probably already have it if they wanted to use it.
Yeah, I feel like anyone who does role play, yeah, and is especially for GMs, because it's different for players. Like I actually really like their suggestion of, hey, buy the Dungeon Masters manual for your player, because yeah, that is a good way to be like, I need a break. Hint, hint. Merry Christmas. Here is the core rule book. Please, GM, for me in the nicest way possible. But yeah, so I mean, if you're a player, that's a good thing. But like as a GM, I was like a couple weeks ago. I was telling you guys, I bought the Modern Age, not because I'm planning on using it next week, but because it's another book in the Age system, and I'm like, I like the Age system, so I bought it, and also I plan on using it later. So, and I have all of the Age books. I even have the PDF forms of all the Age adventure paths. I don't ever use them because they're very specific, but like I have them in the back just in case, like, oh, maybe if I need something for a session. Yeah. So it's like if you're a GM, you're usually whoever the game master is, the person who's the most passionate about the hobby. That's why they're the game master, because no one else wants to be. So they are the ones who buy all the miniatures. They're the ones who buy all the books, who do all of those things. Um, you know, Probably the best gift for a GM if you're just looking for like just stuff.
Sanity is a good gift to give your GM.
Sanity is a good gift. Yes, be more sane that week. Uh, GM for them for a session, that would be a better gift. Kylar's correct. Those books are outside resources are really good. I have bought a couple books myself and read them just because like they have some good suggestions in them. Also, the other thing though is especially if you're running a tabletop game, not an online game, but like to buy accessories. So like the thing that they did show with the elevated platform, those are really useful and they tend to be expensive. But this is a problem we have in our online group is when people fly, you can't really tell, and you can't really elevate them. You just have to like they're flying, trust me, and we have to kind of guess where they are. But those ones actually usually a good platformer. Each of the platforms are 1 inch tall, so that's the same length of the square. So you can count that and be like, okay, so they're 30 squares up, or whatever.
Yeah, and then they go
Above.
flying high, and there's no calculation for it, and you just toss them and stick them onto the ceiling. Like you're way up there. That's what I think is going to be good about switching to tabletop simulators, because it's 3D, so you can actually represent height differences.
Yeah.
So that'd be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other option, of course, and they are correct about this, dice is always a good option. Even if you're like Kylar and you didn't get to use them in a real game, just having dice is just, if you're a role player, you have dice somewhere, and it's just a thing.
I
So
don't think Kyrath has any dice.
well, now you know what to get him for
I
Christmas.
bet he has like, maybe if he has like a board game that has a die in it, he might have like a couple D6s, maybe.
But my neighbor, the other week, my neighbor came into our house. We go to church together, and he's like, we're playing Yahtzee, but we're short some dice. Do you guys have any? And my brothers and I just looked at each other like, maybe.
Nope, no dice. You have no dice.
No, we don't have 100 D6s in the house. No. Anyway. So, but yeah, I thought for the most part, I mean, if you like Dungeons and Dragons, it's a good video, but it was pretty limited. And I think Kyler and I would give you much better suggestions on things to get role players actually.
It felt kind of like an ad for Wizards of the Coast a little bit. It's like, look at this new thing that Wizards of the Coast has, and this thing is really great. I'm just like, alternatively, I don't want any of those because I don't run D&D. Why is Zeri showing me this video?
For this specific discussion, because
are you telling me that you want me to run a D&D campaign next? That's what you want me to do? I don't want.
No.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Maybe just play with me in one. Anyway, moving on. Then the next one, because we talked about MacGuffins and because I think people are not going to be super clear on what MacGuffins are, I thought that Matthew Mercer's video from I think it was a couple of years ago on tips on magical items would be useful, because I think when most people think MacGuffin in a role play game, they think a magical weapon or a sword. So if you're in that category and still think that after we discuss MacGuffins, this is a good video to check out. He goes into I think he goes into what people usually, when people think magic item, they think, oh, I have a cool sword idea, so I'm going to put it in, and they don't take into consideration ramifications for that. And he goes through kind of step by step, and it's not even rule specific. He's just telling you out, here's how you do it. So I appreciated that video a while ago, and so I thought we should bring it back up to rediscuss it.
And it was semi-entertaining too. It's not just like, here are the points for making magic items. It's more interesting than that, and it's not very long. So yeah, I thought it was good. It's just like, oh, it's slightly different if you're a GM trying to create a MacGuffin magical item for your game, then because he's got some things like, if your players are trying to make magical items, here's what you do. So that's another useful thing that's not directly related to what we're talking about, but yeah, you should go check it out because it had some good points that we don't need to address here, because we're going to talk more about the conceptualism of MacGuffins, which is what our third piece of news was about, because we were trying to research it and we didn't want to lead people astray being, this is a MacGuffin, when it's really not, because the term MacGuffin gets thrown around a lot. And we wanted to clarify what we mean when we say a MacGuffin versus just something that is in something that drives the plot forward. It is more specific than that. So Zeri had pointed me to DC Fergeson's video on MacGuffins. He likes using the analogy of, if you can substitute the thing for is it egg McMuffin for an egg McMuffin, and the plot stays the same, then it's a MacGuffin.
Yes.
And if you can't, then it's not a MacGuffin. So the clarification: a MacGuffin is something that drives the plot. If you can substitute it for something else, still plot forward in the same way, that doesn't mean it's actually a MacGuffin. I mean, it's a MacGuffin. Can't switch it out. It means it's more integral to the plot, and it's not a MacGuffin because it's actually important to the plot. It's specific. If it's plot specific, it's not a MacGuffin. If it isn't plot specific and it's just there to be chasing something, then it's MacGuffin. And we will get more into that. But first, we have our highlights from the table, and it was a couple of fun stuff. So I debated, so I'm just gonna let Zeri go first and see what she says, and then I'll just build off that, because I could decide what my highlight was.
Okay, well, I guess we have to address the elephant of the room, because this week I made kind of a poor decision in our Tuesday night game and almost died in session 2 of our D&D World of Warcraft crossover game. But I didn't die, so it ended up being highlight. But I learned a valuable lesson in not getting past Kyrath and letting him take. Which the thinking was, before I stepped into it, in my gut, I knew that there were enemies in that next room. But I said to myself, if I can just get around him and get kind of, I wanted to give him that flanking bonus, especially after he said that. And I was like, if I can just get around, maybe I can get a few hits in with my stick and I don't have to cast magic all the time, And I was thinking maybe it would give me a better line of sight on things. And I was like, I'm maybe being overly paranoid. There's not gonna be monsters in that next room, and there totally were monsters in that next room, and I totally should have listened to my gut. And so, my only hope was that he would miss, which I have a high AC of 14, so I was hopeful, but he didn't. And so yeah, 12 hit points goes really fast when you do 9 points of damage and then 5 points of damage. That's gone pretty quickly. So yeah, that was the first highlight. I didn't die. Fortunately, Barry was very kind to me, and his NPC used his only health potion on me and brought me back, and that was great. And then no one hit me after that, which was even better because he rolled and he just kept beating up Kyrath. So, yeah.
That makes sense. Do you go after, the poor person that looks pretty weak, or do you go after the direwolf druid person? It seems very clear what the untrained, non-tactical, where like would go for the giant wolf, or just run away in terror. Honestly, they should have just ran away. They'd be like, "There's a giant wolf eating people," or I'm out. I'm done. I just bye, guy. You good luck with that. I'm gonna just poof, and he's gone around the corner, never to be seen from again. What happened to Jim? Oh, he ditched. He's a coward. Like,
but he's also alive, so
mm-hmm.
I can't really blame him. Yeah.
Yeah.
You thought of a highlight yet?
See, my highlight is something that happened. Is the whole in the session at the beginning of Friday's session, Pakaz got captured by the Sith as had been planned, and so my highlight is the fallout from that, which none of the players have seen except for Bazak, because I met with him yesterday and we did about like a 45-minute session of Pakaz meeting his captors, and I really like it for the story potential that it brings for the rest of the players later. And we're going to be meeting Bazak's new character next Friday. So another plug-in for that. I'm excited about his new character too. So that is a highlight. I did record the session though. So once people know what's happening, so I'm thinking of treating it potentially as like security footage. If the players find something, I might be like, look, so I think I'm going to post it on the YouTube channel, but keep it private for now, and then I'll make it public once the players uncover the footage, if they ever do, and if they don't ever, and they realize the fallout from it, then I'll just be like, oh look, here's the session that me and Bazak did. So I'm excited. I'm excited for that. As long as my recording, I haven't checked the recording. I'm pretty sure it was fine because it was just voices in Roll20, so it should be fine. But I'm excited for that. So people will eventually see my highlights, and I talk more in detail why I like the highlights so much. But it's really that whole 45-minute conversation between Pakaz and his captors. It made me happy. Rest of the players, yes, you should be concerned that I'm happy.
As a player, I am nervous now. I mean, I'm glad. I'm always happy when my GM's happy. Unless it's negative to me, then I'm not so happy. But I wasn't in this conversation, so I'm gonna take that for what it is and just let things sort themselves out.
It'll just give the players more problems to deal with later.
Oh yeah, we love problems that come up later.
That's all the problems. All the problems come up later.
My highlight from that session was the guards not having the antigen on them, because I was thinking when he said that, I was like, man, he rolled really high. I don't see how he's going to get out of that. I mean, it seems like he's going to be able to convince them basically to let him go. And then, like, I just totally unexpected. You're just like, I don't. And I was like, genius. I mean, it was not really a player moment. That was GM to GM. I was like, that is exactly how you handle that. That was perfect. And so,
well, and I did it without breaking things because it didn't make sense for them to have the antidote on them anyway. So it's the neurotoxin that is used in that particular weapon dissipates on its own as soon as the person that they're trying to knock unconscious falls unconscious. It doesn't specify how that works. I'm assuming it just dissipates over time in reality. Functionally, that means if you're with a party and you fall unconscious, the poison is instantly gone, and then you can be revived very easily. Right. But if you're alone, then they can just keep you unconscious with something else. So it didn't make sense for them to have it doesn't make sense for them to have an antidote for something that just goes away very rapidly on its own, and all it does is knock people unconscious. So even if you accidentally stab yourself with it, they'd just be like, you're unconscious, and then we'll just wake you up when you're, it's not going to kill you. So it didn't make sense. And I also want to do it because, it's a fairly serious moment, and the whole session after that was serious. So it's like, you know what? I'm going to treat this as like a comedic moment a little bit, where the guard now feels bad that he doesn't have the antidote on him. There's a little bit of a Marvel moment, I think.
I think it was well timed, and calling it a Marvel moment is excellent, because I thought the whole session was pretty dark. I think the other thing, if I had to pick a highlight, although it was kind of a low light because it was a low point in the session, um, was when Shiloh told everyone what the cause had done. Because I thought a lot about how Lexa would react, but then when it happened, it was just sort of like, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a good role player. It's debatable. But like I let it hit me as I would let as though I'd heard it the first time, and so I was like in Lexa's mind as though she had heard it the first time, and I was like, and what I came to the conclusion instantly was, oh no, this makes me really mad. This is infuriates me. This makes me want to kill him because he's done something that everything that my whole being has told me no. Like Lexa's whole life, she has actively tried to prevent people from dying. Like that's her whole purpose in life. And then to know that he not only did that, but he did it trusting her, using her to get there. Because if we remember, he wouldn't have even been in that arena or getting that position if it wasn't because of her relationship with Radek and that she made that connection. So she feels completely used and angry at this. And so like when everyone else was kind of like, well, I mean, we're upset, but like they're trying to give him some defense of this. It was easy for me to say like, no, Lexa she has no excuse anymore for him. She can't see past what he's done, and that's it for her. So that was a good moment because it was a good time for us all to like, it was like a smack of reality. Like the things we do have consequences. The people we trust, they do things, and we're responsible for the things that they do because they used us to do them.
Yeah, and I mean the way because I realized that nobody actually knew that that was Picasso's plan. So unless I did something, no one was gonna know. None of the
Mm-hmm.
characters were ever gonna know. I mean, the players knew that that was Bazak's plan, but that was Picasso's plan. But none of the characters would ever know for sure. And so what I did is I had Olivia ditch Picasso basically after because of it, but she still kind of cares about him. So she went to go tell Shilu, like, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
Picasso just got captured," and then Kyrath had Shiloh ask like what happened, like what like in there, and then Olivia's just like no, that's kind of like how he wanted it to go. And then Bazak during that whole thing was like, well, he meant like Olivia would know that he meant for like not he didn't necessarily want all the prisoners to die, but he kind of wanted to kill everybody else. And so then I graciously let Olivia clarify that to Shiloh. Um, so because Olivia would have known that because they kind of like connected, and so I let that so that kind of worked together. But it was a way for me to concretely be like, nope, this was
Mm-hmm.
planned. I mean, as a GM, I don't understand how he thought he was going to kill all the people without killing the prisoners. Um, but that's my brain. And so whether or not it was the intention or not, I was just like, you know what, we're gonna let it fly because everyone's gonna be mad about it anyway. Um, so I used Olivia as the messenger so that they could figure out what actually had happened. Because if they never ran into Picaz again, they're never gonna know for sure what happened. And I think it was an important story driver.
It was, and I think it did a good job of clarifying everyone's moral codes because you're right. I mean, from we know that from Pacaz's perspective, he killing slavers is not wrong. But what I think what was revealed in the session is that's not what the other characters think. The other characters, like I think probably Aeland is the closest in that he thinks that, well, if the person's evil, I don't have a problem killing them. But from Kalani's and Shialu's and Lexa's perspective, those three characters, they seek redemption more often than not. Now, probably Lexa's probably the most morally gray in that area because she has. I mean, we sort of revealed some of her history with Devil, but not all of it. But I mean, she basically she didn't have a problem with Devil dying, and honestly, if Aeland hadn't killed him, she probably would have. But for Lexa, it takes a long time for a person to get to that point where they're like, okay, I'm comfortable with you dying. For the most part, though, these three characters, their code of ethics have been you capture, you turn them over to the police, and you let justice do whatever. And maybe, hopefully, someday they will repent of their their wicked ways, and they'll come back.
Except the
Um,
Whisperer, then you just try and shoot her in the face.
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, once you get to that point, there's no hope. But yeah, and so and then Aeland, of course, is a character that he can kind of go both ways, but I think he's the kind of character that gets better or worse depending on the people he's around. So when he's with these other three, he's like, okay, I can see that. And what we learned in that session was Akaz's moral code is vastly different from everyone else's, and so that's why it instantly, when it was clarified, we have group 1 and group 2, and so now we're having to deal with, okay, what does group 2 do with the fact that they know someone that they've traveled with for so long, seems to have not a problem with killing people like they do, and is totally okay with that, and the consequences that come with those decisions.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily planning for the prison break to crystallize that conflict, but the conflict's been there for the entire campaign,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm really glad that it did clarify things, as I wasn't necessarily certain that Bazak was going to have Pakaz go out and do his crazy meat grinder death trap thing. I did not predict that. I made it so that if you turned off the power, then the creatures would get loose, and I was pretty sure that most of the rest of the party wouldn't be okay with that, so they would use it as a last resort.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm glad it clarified the issue because it finally had this tension that's been going the entire campaign finally get resolved.
Mm-hmm.
So that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I think it did too. I think it was an excellent moment in our campaign where the things that we've been discussing, trying to figure out, it was like, okay, clarified. Here's what the issue has been all along, and that's why a lot of the things that we've done have been so botched or not on the same page, because there's been this underlying current of misunderstanding of what people believe. Now we know where everyone stands.
Yeah.
So,
That's the
yeah.
highlights. Very serious highlights there at the end. But it is now time for the greatest main topic of all time, the quest for the Holy Grail, as it were. MacGuffins! And I use the Holy Grail because if you've ever seen Indiana Jones, or really the Holy Grail in and of itself in old legend is also a MacGuffin. Because it's more about the journey at that point than actually getting the Holy Grail. So if the
Mm-hmm.
quest is about the journey and not about the thing you're getting at the end, that's definitely a MacGuffin. Um, so yeah, let's just get that whole definitional thing. I touched on it earlier. So a MacGuffin, it can be a person or a place or a thing. It's most often an object, um, and it serves to drive the plot forward in the sense that either the antagonist or protagonist want it. Usually it's because they both want it, or one wants the other one not to get it, so they're competing for this thing. And it's MacGuffin if you can substitute something else for it and it doesn't matter to the plot. So if it only shows up, if somebody doesn't get it early in the movie and use it for a specific plot purpose, then it's a MacGuffin. Because like if it never gets used or it's only used at the very end, and it's like some doomsday thing, you could substitute it for another doomsday thing and it would be exactly the same. Um, so I think an example that was used in the video that we talked about earlier that
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily agree with that is they say is a MacGuffin is the Infinity Gauntlet and the Infinity Stones. It
Yeah.
is up until the point that Thanos actually uses it, because it's not like it's you could replace it with anything else. It does a very specific thing,
Mm-hmm.
and he wants it to do a very specific thing. And since it's a two-part movie, now the characters have to deal with the fallout of we messed up and let him get the thing and the consequences. I mean, you could kind of argue that there could be other ways of killing half the population, so maybe it's still a MacGuffin, but
Well,
now when they're dealing with it, it's a lot more concrete than that. It's like,
yeah.
like half of everybody in the entire universe is just gone.
Well, and all the pieces of the MacGuffin too of that gauntlet um, have been used, and not all of them were just plot. Like I think he's correct with the Guardians of the Galaxy jewel, because they don't use it for anything but to kill the villain at the
And
end.
Thor 2, the Ether, is also
Mhm.
not used. The Tesseract shows up numerous times and has many different functions.
Yeah, there's a lot of times that without the Tesseract, A and B would not have happened. The Tesseract is kind of, it's uh like for instance, the first Avengers movie. Without the Tesseract, Loki is not able to control people. So at that point,
No,
it's not
no, no,
really.
that's the Mind Stone.
Oh, the
That's in his
Mind Stone.
staff. That's
Okay,
so the mind. So I think it's interesting
but
because
still.
the Tesseract kind of is the most MacGuffin-y feeling, but it changes what it does so often that it's
Hmm.
because like Hydra wanted it for a power source, and then they use it to. I mean, it's generally used as a power source, but they use it
Yeah.
for things. So I guess you could substitute it for a different power source, but the Mind Stone, that's not, because Loki uses it to mind control people, and it's very specific. And then it goes into Vision's forehead, and that creates Ultron and all this other stuff. So the Mind Stone, definitely not a MacGuffin, because it
Yeah.
serves very specific plot things.
I think a better example of a MacGuffin is the secret plans from A New Hope. That is a MacGuffin. Like I mean, there's other ways to defeat the Empire. This was just, and they didn't even defeat the Empire. This was just the easiest way to destroy the Death Star. And everything that the characters does is just in pursuit of this MacGuffin, and it drives the plot forward.
What's
So
interesting about
that's
that, though, is if you go to Rogue, what they did in Rogue One is they made it much less of a MacGuffin because it's directly tied into the character's father, who designed the created the design flaw. So what they did is they took the
mhm,
MacGuffin from A New Hope and said, "You thought this was just a MacGuffin, and now let's make it an actually interesting plot device."
yes,
And which is like a retcon, but it's a retcon I really appreciate. So they took the MacGuffin and made it something more interesting than just, oh, there was this design thing that we exploited. It's like, oh no, it was put in there on purpose to have problems, which
mhm.
feels a little bit like responding to fan criticism about A New Hope being, why would they design it that way? But you need an exhaust port to get rid of things. You need to get rid of like exhaust and such. Like, why does it
Right.
cause a chain reaction that explodes everything? Well, that was the part that I guess was
That
set
was
up.
that.
That was the setup. So
Right.
I guess I'm okay with it. It's not like the entire exhaust port was the thing that was adjusted. So I
Well,
like
and
it.
I can get there too. I mean, if you've ever looked at like blueprints for like a massive project or building, it's really easy if the engineer just misses something or hides something. I mean, there's stories of people who put like secret passages or something in a large castle that they built that no one knew except the engineer. So I mean, it makes sense that with a massive moon-sized project, you'd be able to slip something in there that would make it catastrophic if it failed.
Especially if you're the smartest scientist on the project. Maybe you're just
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, I put those in there like in that specific position because it does this thing. And they'd be like, okay. And then
Hmm.
no, maybe nobody else realizes. You know what? This could explode. If nobody else realizes it, then you're good. So I completely buy it. It just felt like a little bit of fan service. Why is the Death Star so easy to destroy? Well, here's why. Because we had a saboteur in there. There we go. Wait, let's move on to I've established what isn't a MacGuffin. I think leave it. For more clarification, go check out the video because it's like a
Hmm.
12-minute video on MacGuffins, which
And it's
we went for like 12 minutes. It lays it out pretty well.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's a foundation for the things we're going to talk about now.
yes. So if you haven't seen it, you want more clarification because we weren't clear enough. Pause this, go watch that, and then come back. Because now we're going to talk about using MacGuffins specifically in the role-playing games. Should you
Hmm.
use them? When should you use them? When should you not use them? How to make things more interesting and not purely a MacGuffin, which I think is what me and Zeri both lean towards, is a
Hmm.
general rule. Um, yeah. So initial thoughts: MacGuffins, yes or no?
I tend to say no unless you have a very, very specific reason to use them. Because the thing about a MacGuffin is that it relies on the people to go after it. Now, that's easy to do in a movie or a book. You have full control of the characters. So they're going to find the MacGuffin because you want them to. But for a player, um, there's more, the saying, there's more than one way to skin a cat. If the player, if let's say the problem for the player is there is a necromancer doing problems in a forest, and that is eventually going to get to the people. And the players hear that there's a weapon that can insta kill necromancers, and they got to go find that weapon. And you as a GM, you try to sell this to them, get this MacGuffin, it will help you, it will do the thing, and then the cleric in your party goes, actually, I have a spell called Kill Necromancer. Let's just go find him and do it. Well, there goes your whole MacGuffin. The whole plot, the whole journey for that MacGuffin is gone. And so for me, I would hesitate using them unless you're going to give them a very specific, like a reason to do it. Like maybe it's as a one session thing. Like actually, Kylar reminded me of this, that I'd accidentally turned some people into MacGuffins, not intentionally, but I had in my Murder Hobos campaign, which I do at home. Uh, the I don't do this online. I would not want to share this online. but
I'm
but
gonna tell
the,
them you said that.
I mean, Sarah was in it. She already knows. She knows. So, but the whole point of the session was my players needed something to do to level up. That was the point of the session. I hadn't planned the mission ahead of time. So what I told them was, you need to escort kids from city 1 to city 2. And that turned all the whole wagon. Those kids were the MacGuffin. They got captured by a witch. 3 of them got eaten because the players were really bad at their job.
Well, they just took
Um,
a rest inside the castle while the kids were still captives. I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah, kids get captured. Let's go to sleep for 8 hours. I'm sure the witch will just be patient and she won't
What
eat
you gonna
them.
do? What you gonna do?
Not rest. That's what you're gonna do. You gotta save your. But
Not
you know
everybody can be Jack Bauer. Some people just
yeah,
need to sleep.
that's true. Now, if I had made so those kids were a MacGuffin, and the reason I put that MacGuffin in there was literally I needed them to have a reason. I needed the players to have a reason to come together. I guess in a way, you could say that in our current campaign, the caravan is sort of a MacGuffin, but it's not because one of the players is her family, so she is emotionally tied to the safety of that caravan, and because the players care about this other player, the caravan is not really a MacGuffin. Um, so I would say, again, that's what Kylar and I agree on, is that yes, we have them, but not really. Most of the time, what we plan out or what we put in our players, we're like, we try to find a reason. Here's why your character specifically cares about this.
Mhm. Yeah, the caravan, I mean, could be switched out with another caravan, and I think serve functionally almost the same purpose except for winter. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it borders on the MacGuffin status, I think, a little bit. But it's not, I mean, we're protecting it, so it's not like a goal we have, but we're trying to keep it safe, so that's kind of a goal. But that's kind of just like the intermediate when we're going between cities. We have other goals that we're trying to do. And so I
Right.
think the most useful, like the reason I wouldn't say don't use MacGuffins. So if you're like a new GM and you're not good at wrapping together people's backstories yet, you don't have, but you just want to run something, and you know your entire group is good with like, let's go find the dragon's treasure. You know what? That can be fun. So I'm not going to say don't use it. I think Zara and me like to run a more cerebral campaign than that.
Mm-hmm.
And our players enjoy things that are more complex than that. So if you've got new GMs or like a group of all new players, they're really useful plot tools because you can follow a familiar format from films and books. Be like, so you're like, oh yeah, this is gonna be how this works, and everybody knows how the heist goes, like a heist movie goes. So you know, like if we're doing a heist or something, and we're just going after the thing, that can work in a campaign if people don't need a deeper motivation to go want the thing. Um,
Right.
and even if
Right.
they do want the thing, they're like, I want the treasure so I can go send my mom on a cruise before she dies or something. You know what? It's still a MacGuffin because there could be other ways to get money other than stealing money from a bank. Um,
Right.
or you could be stealing something else from a bank. You could be stealing gems. You could be stealing like loan, like you could be stealing stocks or something else. So it doesn't necessarily. But for new GMs and players who aren't extremely longitudinal story driven, I think it's great for getting them something to go after. Because if you don't have anything to go after, then there's no point. So even
Right.
tangentially, a MacGuffin could be like, the side quest where they're like, hey, I'll pay you money if you go save my friend. Or if you go transport this thing from point A to point B. The MacGuffin is, oh, I want money.
Right.
Money is the MacGuffin at that point because it's not story related. It's just a means to get the stuff. You know, like I want money
Yes.
so I can go buy my cool stuff, basically. So um, I think for players who aren't used to how in-depth role playing can be, it's a really easy way to be like, hey, we're gonna go storm the castle and steal the treasure, and then they'll be like, that'll be fun. Or if you have a really strategy-minded group that likes playing challenging things that don't really need some sort of complex story, they're playing more against the game than with each other, which
Mm-hmm.
isn't. It's just a different way than we play it. Then a MacGuffin works really well because then you can just set up. Then they at least have some form of reason for getting into the combat that they're getting into, or trying to avoid the guards that they're doing. It's like, oh look, treasure, there we go. Or there's this guy who's looking for the treasure. You're also looking for the treasure. If you get there first, and that's another aspect of the game. So then you can.
Right.
And so I wouldn't discounted titling. It depends on what campaign you're trying to run, and if your players will respond to just, do you want,
Yeah.
do you want things? So if the players respond, it's fine. Just go with it.
I would agree, and I think if you're gonna, I think it works better for a session thing. Where I would say even for new players, I would not make my whole campaign about a MacGuffin. That I think will get old for a player. So if you make the whole campaign to get to steal the treasure of this dragon, well, along the way, hopefully if you run a campaign, and let's say you're running a campaign from level 1 to 20, and like the end game is to get this treasure, unless there's going to be some like device in there that lets you control the whole planet or something, but then your players are probably going to be rich, and they're going to be like, why would we deal with this dragon? We've done much easier ways to get money. In fact, we own a kingdom now, we don't need to. So if MacGuffins work better in short term things, short term goals. So like you said, right now in the fantasy age, the caravan is basically a MacGuffin, because I use it to get you to go to the next place. This is okay. We're done with this city. We're going to the next city, and because you are in charge of the caravan, and also because you like winter, and this is her family, you're all going with them to point B. Um, they don't serve a lot more function than that. They
I
may
mean,
later, but
they're
for
they're
now,
they're safe. They're a safe place. They're like, oh, we ran out of supplies. Caravan has supplies.
yeah,
We're good. We can go back to them. We're fine.
yeah,
And so that's
it's
why
kind of
Harmony
a
likes the caravan. He's like, safety in numbers, and traveling in the desert alone is a lot more dangerous than traveling when you know there's a whole group of people that can bail you out later,
mhm.
as long as like something really bad doesn't happen, which yeah, we won't go into there. But yeah, I think for experienced GMs or players that enjoy more story-driven things, yeah, using it as minor plot devices is better. Um,
Mhm.
so either to introduce a new villain or like a new campaign storyline. So that's what I did in my transition. I just wanted people to get to Coruscant, because once I get to Coruscant, a bunch of interesting nonsense can happen. Um, so my MacGuffin was getting money for Thea to basically build a colony up as like a refugee site
Mhm.
from the Senate. That's it's. I mean, people know about, like, they've been there, like in Luthen, and ostensibly they would want to help them out with that, but uh, the bureaucracy is annoying, and we kind of just let the two ambassadors from there, once we kind of realized that we have more pressing matters to go on with, we're just like, you know what, they'll probably get money without our help anyway, so we have a lot more personal things to get to. So I just used it as a, why are we on Coruscant, Kylar? It's like, you're here to do this thing, and that's not really why I want you here, but this is why you came here. And it made sense in the story, be like, for the governor to ask them to go with her, because
Right.
some of them have ties to the Republic and the Jedi, and they've basically saved them a couple of
Yeah.
times. So it makes it like, you know what, come with us. You can help us, because we don't like the senator who represents us. So you're gonna have to work on this whole thing. And so that was my MacGuffin to introduce my campaign. It was bumpy. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little bumpy. The transition was rough because people didn't realize exactly what was going on. I didn't want people to realize, but it was fuzzy.
It's
Um,
a little more obfuscated than I think you intended.
yes, it was. And then my other thing is, I think if you can turn, so if it is a MacGuffin and it doesn't really serve a purpose, and
Yeah.
your player is pursuing it and the villains are pursuing it, maybe have it actually be super important for the rest of your campaign, and something wildly different will happen whether or not the players get it or the villain gets it. So if the players decide, nah, I don't want to go after the thing, then the villain just
Mhm.
gets it, and then maybe the villain will be way more powerful, because it's actually, you thought it was just like this ancient artifact that this guy wanted you to go find for him, and you're just like, yeah, that sounds boring, but it turns out it's like some super useful, like devious, like portal to the underworld. And so if you'd gotten it, it'd be totally different. um, and so
Well,
I
that's
think
yeah.
in that way, then you introduce story elements through the MacGuffin, and the MacGuffin doesn't become the sole focus of the story. um,
Well, that is, yeah. You have the advantage of movies and books in a role play game, is that you can make any MacGuffin important. And I would say too, to add to that is like if like maybe you have an item in your game and you intend it to be integral to the plot, but all your players think it's a MacGuffin because that's how you've presented it so far. You can always skip to the part where they learn it's something more important. So let's say you've got let's use the Holy Grail. Let's use the Holy Grail as an example because, like Kylar said, it's the classic MacGuffin. There's no reason to get the MacGuffin other than the journey. But let's say you have the Holy Grail as your campaign thing, and your players start to realize it's a MacGuffin, and they think, maybe there's other ways to get eternal life. I don't need to go find the Holy Grail. It's not that big of a deal. I don't even care about this quest anymore. Well, then you can either you can introduce something where you give the Holy Grail a different ability. So you say something along the lines of, "Oh, not only does it give you everlasting life, but it also has the ability to grant one person a wish." And now, and then you've got all your players who have all their problems. Well, now, it's still kind of a MacGuffin, but it's more important to them now because now, especially if then right before you reveal this information, you attack their home and wipe out most of their family members and and everything that they have. Well, now they're going to be really keen on something that can grant them a wish to undo all of that. Um,
Yeah, and if it's something that's specific and it's the only way to solve a problem, it's not a MacGuffin. So
mhm,
the example in the video is the lightning in Back to the Future. It's the only thing powerful enough to power the DeLorean in the past. So yes, they're
right.
chasing after the lightning, but the lightning is their only viable option. So it's very integral to the plot. So if you killed their whole family and then they're like, oh, or maybe like someone's dying, you injure one of the players or one of the NPCs that's with the party, and the only way to save them is through the item that they were already looking for. Then it's not just, oh, we wanted this thing because it's important. Now it's like, well, now we need it. It's the
Hmm.
only way we can save our friend. So it's something different. So I think if you're creating an object for your villains to want, have it be something where that's like the only logical way that they could accomplish what they were trying to do. And so it's
Hmm.
not really a MacGuffin. It's like they want this really badly. It's not like, oh, I would give up after the party thwarted me a couple of times. It's nope, this is like the one thing that will do the thing that I need to do because I want to do the thing. And so it's more interesting than just, oh, I'm stealing this artifact because it'll be evil and ha ha ha. It'll give me more power. Have it do something really specific and really important to the plot and really tied into what your villain is trying to do. So I would suggest not creating the MacGuffin first. I like to create my villains first. I like to ask, or in the case of the Star Wars campaign, I'm ask what villains would work well to wrap this whole thing up. And so I've
Right.
created a couple new villains, but stuck with a lot of pre-existing villains that I wanted to resolve the story arcs out of.
And from that perspective, if you're like me and you started a campaign, and the first thing you're thinking about is, okay, uh, what is going to be the main villain for this campaign? Which is how I start my campaigns. Is I decide what kind of story do I want to tell, and who would be the best villain to represent that story. Um, I MacGuffins don't even come into play for me. I can tell you without spoiling things for Kylar that the conclusions I came for their motivation is okay. This is their motivation. This is how they're going to try and figure out how to solve it, and ultimately, this is what they're going to do to acquire it or build it or whatever they need to do to do it. So yeah, I think like I said earlier, I would not build a campaign on a MacGuffin. I would much rather build it on a villain and why, or a concept, an idea. So like, let's say you're building a campaign on family and the importance of family. So then you create a villain who's the antithesis of family. Maybe it's an orphan who thinks that all family just leaves you and dies, and so his motivations are to like separate people from their family, or maybe he's someone who his family was killed in a horrible way, and he wants revenge on the people who did it, and but in order to do that, he forsakes his friends and those who do care about him, and ends up getting them killed. And so your players then have to um, they have to bring that antithesis, like maybe in order to start the campaign you made everyone role family members. Everyone's a cousin to each other or something. So yeah, I would, when you're thinking about MacGuffins, I would limit them to either this is going to be one part of my campaign, but really it's not going to be a MacGuffin because I'm gonna make it important later, or it's, I need them to do something this session to get to this town that has the important thing. So there's there's a beer bottle in this town. It's really expensive. I want it. I'll pay you 100 gold to go get it. If that gets them to where you need them to go, then I would say, yeah, make your MacGuffin. You don't need, not every single quest you send your players on need to have an impact for the rest of the game. They can just be as simple as I needed you to get to the city, so this is what I gave you to do it.
Yeah, I think we should have asked Kyrath to do this session too, because his section of the campaign was much more MacGuffin-y feeling for the Star Wars campaign. But he did a nice twist of things where we became the housing of the thing that the Sith wanted, and it was also more interesting. I think the thing that was more like a MacGuffin than the original Sith artifact was the Heart of Virtue lightsaber crystal that we needed to kill the Shadow entirely. And so we had kind of Ajax and people were looking for it behind the scenes, and then it became we need to go rescue them from the Sith to make sure we have this thing. So it didn't show up until really late. I think the only problem with having that be the only way we could defeat it, I'm pretty sure that was the only way we could defeat it. That's how it seemed. Was that we ended up spinning our wheels, just hoping nothing terrible would happen for a middle part of the campaign. Just like, oh crap, the Shadow keeps showing up, but we still have no idea how we're supposed to defeat this thing until we had the MacGuffin in hand. I like that the MacGuffin wasn't there the whole time. Not like, oh, we need to go find the thing. I knew that it was there the whole time. But Dell wasn't sure if it was like the only way or if it was like a backup. He had seen like a vision of, hey, this thing might be important. He didn't know exactly what it was. So he was treating it as, I'm going to send people to look for this thing. I don't really know what it is or what it does or if we can defeat this a different way. But I saw that and I think it's important, so I'm going to go send some people to look for it. And then it became clearer later, like after we went to Dantooine, it was like, oh nope, this is the thing that we need. Which I don't know. What are your thoughts on how that part of the campaign played out? Like I enjoyed most of it. What are your thoughts on the use of the MacGuffin in that way?
So I thought he did a good job with not having us search for the MacGuffin the whole time, but I did think that maybe it should have been clearer earlier on, because, like you said, there was a time where we were just kind of spinning our wheels, and I think if he had hinted at it a little bit earlier, we would have gone to Dantooine a little bit faster. We would have been like, okay, this is where we're headed. This is what we need to do. So, what I did appreciate though was that he didn't just make it a one-time thing. Like it's just full for because Eagle is still able to use it, and it still has the things that we've wait kind of less and more of like a tool in our box that we can use now. But yeah, I think that maybe if it was hinted at a little earlier, it would have made things a little clearer as far as where we were supposed to go.
Because basically we were just waiting for the journal to get decoded, and yet the journal doesn't point towards the Heart of Virtue at all. And so I think Kyrath maybe had been intending for us to follow the plot line of, like there's the myth of the Shadow on Dantooine, so clearly it's shown up before, and tried to find history, but we were so preoccupied with trying not to let it murder things that we were kind of just content to wait until we had more information before we went to go search for things.
My main point is, I can get it out, that if you're gonna have a MacGuffin, make it clear that it's gonna MacGuffin. Otherwise, I think your players are just gonna be confused. Like, I don't know what to do. The thing keeps happening. We don't have the answer for the thing.
Yeah, so that kind of was a little bit frustrating, but I wish there would have been some way to discover a different way to defeat the Shadow. I like it, but I think it would have worked better if it had worked as Dell had thought it was, as like a last resort in case everything else goes horribly wrong. So he thought, oh, I think that will help us destroy the shadow. But in his mind, destroying the crystal would have been good enough originally to get rid of it. He didn't know the essence would transfer. So in his mind, he's, well, in case we fail and the Sith do get the shadow, we'll find the thing that'll help us potentially kill it.
Right.
But then he didn't know what's going on after the transfer, and he was trying to find out what's going on. And that just kind of turned into a thing. But yeah, I think so. But I think it worked out. I don't know. It's just that Dell was invested in the campaign. I don't know for a lot. But yeah, make the MacGuffin have a point, and also if there is a necessary component of the plot, make sure you know about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's that. Anything else to add before we say goodbye to all of the people who are watching?
I guess just to add on a final point there, try to avoid frustrating your players. That is the danger of MacGuffin, is you can frustrate them to this is the only way we can do things. And if your players, even if one or two people aren't that invested, it will frustrate those one or two people. They won't see the point of it, and you don't want to get to that point. So if you're going to use a MacGuffin, try to make it something that everyone wants, or if you're suspecting that people don't want it, then try and entice them in a way that's like, this will help your character do X, or this is important because of this reason. Don't just throw it in there because you're like, I can't come up with anything else to do, so this is what we're doing. Try and have a purpose for anything you do.
I would say you can have like the MacGuffin be the only way to do something if it's the villain's only way to do something. Because if the players don't want the villains to succeed, then they're going to want to go after it to stop the villain. And so then that doesn't feel railroading, because their goal is to stop the person from getting the thing. Instead of, we absolutely 100% need this thing to go do whatever we want it to do. And so I think that's the flipping of it changes the agency of the players a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that has been talk on MacGuffins. So it has been tons of fun. GMs, let us know when you've used MacGuffins in your campaign. Let us also know if it has ever gone horribly wrong. So have your players gotten totally derailed, completely ignored what you wanted to do, ruined all of your plans, become the villains because of a MacGuffin. All of these things are possible. Also, you should keep up to date on the rest of our Living Legend stuff. So we have our Warcraft stuff that happens on Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Central, and we have our our existing Fantasy Age and Star Wars campaigns that take place on Fridays at 8 p.m. Central. And then, of course, there's this podcast. Plugging again in 2 weeks, 2 Fridays, we have our Christmas special that I'm running using the Primeval system, where our players are playing themselves as they get whisked away and have to fight dinosaurs in order to make it out with their lives. So nothing says, joy like running in terror from a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Merry Christmas, y'all! I brought guns.
There will be a lot of red and green, though, because it's in a jungle. It might not be what you wanted, but there will be festive colors in a different way, so you should definitely check that as well. Also check out, we also have a Twitter. Links are all in the description for our highlight, for our news and everything. And so have a great evening.